Thanks, Cian Corla. I'm happy to be speaking to this windfall gains in the energy sector bill 2023. I support the introduction of the windfall tax on energy companies after the huge amount of pressure put on the government to bring it in. You clearly didn't when the opposition were calling for it very clearly a year and a half ago. But it clearly doesn't go far enough. 75% on everything over 20%, over a 20% annual increase. That is a built-in 20% increase in profit, and the company gets to keep 25% on everything else. These are companies that, in the middle of an energy price crisis, in the middle of a cost of living crisis, decided to raise prices even further so they could gouge more profits out of already struggling people. 377,400 people in this country were unable to keep their homes warm last year, and up to 40% of the population fell into fuel poverty. A huge amount of that pain was down to deliberate decisions by massive corporations to gouge prices and make billions off the back of it. I think we should go after every cent they made of all the ordinary people, all the pain people felt last winter. This bill also doesn't go far enough because it targets one sector in a whole system that is engaged in price gouging and profiteering. Earlier this year, Oxfam's Survival of the Richest publication reported that at least 50% of inflation was caused by price profiteering. They called this as much of a cost of profit crisis rather than a cost of living crisis. The European Central Bank has now reported that they too believe that about 50% of inflation has been caused by rising profits. The CSO Irish company profits are up 17.7% on this time last year. Food and energy corporations have seen record profits and are making record payouts to their rich shareholders and billionaire owners. The CPI for groceries has gone up 13.1% in 12 months. Bread, a basic staple, has gone up 18%. Data from supermarket watcher Kantar shows that it could be more like 17%. Meanwhile, we have 677,000 people living below the poverty line and more than 30% struggling to make ends meet. This is a deep, deep cost of living crisis. On one hand, we have people who are facing serious hardships with no sign of letting up. On the other hand, we have giant corporations making record profits off the back of increased prices, increased margins and increased profits. That is deeply wrong. This is the kind of situation any decent government would step into and make sure that the money that has been gouged out of people's pockets is recovered in full. Last month, the Taoiseach refused to rule out a windfall tax on supermarkets. He said he needed proof that there was price gouging. Ask anyone on the street ask anyone on the street and they'll tell you there's price gouging going on. But if you really need proof, bring in legislation forcing these companies to publish profits so we can get that proof and to ensure this never happens again. And then tax back every cent that these companies have gouged out of ordinary people and put it back into people's pockets. And I just want to finish by referring, there's been lots of points made about the privatisation of our energy, the privatisation of our health, and the privatisation of the attempt of Fine Gael and Labour to force people to pay for water and potentially create water poverty. And the news just in the last day or two on Thames Water, I think really points out clearly that the mass movement on the Right to Water campaign was absolutely correct in the position they adopted. Fine Gael and Labour would have been well on their way to have privatisation if they had got that implemented back in 2014 and 15. Water was privatised as part of Thatcher's era, the neoliberalisation of our services, on the basis that they're going to be more dynamic and they're going to be put more money into the services. And just to point out that water bills for customers went up by 40% above inflation in England, but Thames Water is 55 billion in debt versus 65 billion in dividends paid out to their their boards. I'm really pleased, and I want to put it on the record, that the people of Ireland stood up against the attempt of the government, and what we really need now is a referendum on our water to keep water in public service.